Get this. All right. We're going to get started. You guys can all come on in. We're going to get started. I know it's, we always say ABF at 9:15. We always assume 9:20. And then we get started at 9:25 right now. No. Come on in, everyone. So just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. So again, there is that vase for Q&A. I was just talking to Dr. McGinniss this morning about, well, or was it last night? Or maybe this morning. I don't even remember when we were talking about it. But for the Q&A, we're going to have a Q&A this evening. We're just going to open it up wide in terms of what kind of questions you want to ask. I just kind of figured, hey, we have a seminary professor here. He's a pretty smart guy. Enjoyed all of his classes. And so if you want to ask any and all questions that I get to filter, by all means, ask the question. But, you know, just to kind of share a story with Dr. McGinniss as he comes up here, you know, I think he said this last morning or not, but, you know, his dissertation that he wrote on was on the Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, as some of you know, and interesting book to write a dissertation on. And so every time in class, everybody knew who he was. When he said that he was Dr. Love, okay, like, I mean, that really was his kind of identity in the seminary. And we would have classes, and no matter what class it was, okay, I mean, just Old Testament hermeneutics, you know, Old Testament theology. I mean, we could be I think we were talking about Genesis. We were in the book of Genesis, and it always went back to the song somehow, right? He always made it so that he would go back to the, you know, the Song of Songs, and we would have the most interesting discussions in class about that book and about everything and the contents of that book. But one of the things that really resonated with me the most, and part of just my friendship with, I'm going to say it, with Mark. Just please stop calling me Dr. Vo. Don't turn. You guys have all turned against me, by the way, all right? So I want to point that out. But one of my, you know, friendships with him is that as he talked through the book, as we talked about these things in class, you know, and just the topic of, you know, marriage and sex within marriage and all that stuff, is that he had a great marriage. He had a wonderful marriage with his wife, Joy. They loved each other. They were just so good for each other. And he can talk the way he talked because he had a great marriage. And that was one of the things that resonated with me, and we would talk all the time with that, and just, you know, how we help people, how I can grow my own marriage and whatnot. And so he was not just some seminary prof who wrote some academic paper or whatever dissertation it is and had all these, you know, theological terminologies that he would talk about things, but he was just a man who loved his wife, you know, and was just a godly man outside the class through and through. And so I'm super excited for him to talk about it. If you have questions on this book and things come up, put it in the Q&A, please. You know, so I can look at the questions first. But no, it'll be good, and I'm just excited to have him teach on the topic. So, with that, let me go ahead and pray for us first, and then we'll get started. Father, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for this time that just Dr. McGinniss is here to be able to just kind of teach us the word. I know we're going to talk about suffering some more later this morning, but as he talks on the book of the Song of Songs, Lord, it's such a great book in the Old Testament. It is your word. Lord, it is a book that is often neglected to some extent because it is difficult to deal with sometimes, and the contents of it are sometimes also difficult, Lord, but it's a great book. It is your word. We ought to know it. We ought to understand it, Lord, and I know Dr. McGinniss has studied it well, and I pray that it will be just refreshing for everyone here, and just that we can build good understanding, that we can give you all the glory. Again, we thank you for this morning and for this time. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen.
Thanks so much, John. Appreciate the intro. Just two books. One book here out in the back on suffering. It would be a blessing to you and to those that are suffering. 10 different stories. My story is in it. And also the Song of Songs, which After you have this lesson, you may burn the book because you're saying, I don't believe anything the man says. But if you want, those books are out there as well. And I know John wrote his dissertation on the book of Ephesians, but John is also a scholar when it comes to the song. So if you have any questions about the song after I leave, you can ask John, because you're going to say, you're not going to ask me because you don't want to offend me, but you're going to ask John, does the book really say what he said it said? Yes, it does. So we'll get to that in a few minutes. And I want you to think about this question as we look at the song this morning. So I want you to, if you got a piece of paper, electronic writing device, I want you to complete this sentence. Sex is. I want you to think about it and complete that sentence. Now, some of you are saying, on Sunday morning, do we really have to think about that word? So one question, sex is. Then what I want you to do is answer this question. Sex is whatever I wrote because. So you might say sex is something that should not be talked about in church. You complete the second sentence by stating, because my parents never told me to talk about sex. All right? Now, while I'm curious to know how you completed the first sentence, I'm more interested in the answer to the second. Is your definition, is my definition congruent with God's? See, because as believers, we understand, I've been around your church all weekend now. I know your pastor, I know his wife. We use this Bible to inform our worldview and everything. When it comes to work, we work according to what the Scripture says. When we give, we have missions, we help the poor, social justice issues, we go back to the Word. Well, when it comes to physical intimacy and sex, where do we go? Thou shalt not. It's sometimes the best we can do. You know, sometimes we find our worldview on physical intimacy, sex, from the world. Let's go to Cosmopolitan. You've seen the headlines. Or let's go to the internet. No, don't do that. So where do we get our worldview when it comes to sex? My friends. My parents. They're good, but are they coming from it from a biblical perspective? And I want to make sure that we anchor ourselves, just like we do with suffering, that we anchor our response in the Word of God. And when it comes to sex and those things about physical intimacy, we should be doing that from this as well. There's 4 keys that open up this book for us this morning. The first key is to recognize the genre. So if you have your Bibles, you can open up to the song. And you notice what it says right there in verse 1, the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. This is a song. It is one song. That is the genre of the book. So we have to read it as a song. And you can have your worship team, when they're real creative, they can put this to music. How long would it take us to sing 8 chapters? But this is what their music was. And I do believe Solomon wrote that, and we'll get into some issues there. The second key is to identify the audience. The audience is, since Solomon is the author, written to the time of Solomon. The kingdom at this point is at its zenith. It's the best Israel will ever be, is under Solomon. There's peace. And when there's peace, then we can talk about poetry and artistry. Now, some of you are asking the question in your mind, all right, the audience is Solomon's people in Solomon's day, then how did Solomon write this book? Because this book celebrates monogamy. It celebrates the love between one man and one woman in a heterosexual marriage. And we all know Solomon had 1,000 wives. And some of you said, how did he write this book? Because he got to his 1,000th wife, looked back and said, oops, I blew it. And you can see that in chapter 8, verse 12, where Solomon actually makes fun of himself. And I'll let John go deeper when he preaches the song. But Solomon writes the book and realizes that as much as I thought 1,000 women would be great, it's not God's design. And the love of one woman and one man is the best. And that's why he writes it, because he didn't want people to be like him. The third key is to identify the purpose of this book. And remember, this is wisdom literature. Wisdom literature is meant to help us navigate life wisely, skillfully. And this area of sex, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, is a huge area. And it is one that's not talked about most in the church, even though we have a whole book of the Bible. So I say the purpose of the book is this. The Song of Songs is a love song between a couple who revel in their strong desire for each other. Through the use of intimate dialogue, this couple shares their yearning to be together when separated and passionately enjoy each other when they're in each other's presence. While the garden motif reminds the reader of the Garden of Eden, this garden is post-fall, and there are some obstacles the couple must overcome to be together. Through the use of highly charged sexual imagery that's clothed in Hebrew poetry, this fictitious couple invites every married couple who is wise to enjoy their own celebration of love at the proper time. However, at the same time, the song recognizes the intensity of sexual desire and cautions unmarried people not to arouse or awaken love until the proper time. And that's important. The fourth key is to recognize the structure. And the structure is somewhat unique. The structure is based on 4 themes: separation, desire, obstacle, and union. There's always these 5 that go through the book 7 times. There's 7 movements or 7 cycles. I like the word movement better. Now, I want you to notice something interesting about the book. If you look at chapter 1, verse 2, it says, "May he kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine." Now, notice something here. She's not a good Baptist. She's acquainted with kisses and she's acquainted with wine. All right? But this is what the girl's like. Now notice, may he kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. Notice the third person there. She has this wish. And ladies, you can say to your husbands later, do you hear what the Bible says? I want more kisses. Number 1 complaint of women. They want more touch and physical affection without the sex part right away. All right? But that's another conversation. May he kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. Now notice, she's talking about him. In the next line, for your love is better than wine. She brings him up on the mental stage because it goes from he to you. So this separation is right here in the book. They're separated, then she brings him in. If you look at the end of the book, it's interesting how the book ends. In verse 13, it said, "Oh, you who sit in the gardens, my companions are listening to your voice. Let me hear it." So he's calling to her. Then she says, "Hurry, my beloved, be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices." At this point, she's saying, you're away, come back. See, this is a book that begins in separation and ends in separation. And what the book is showing us by its very structure is that's how most of us function in marriage. There's always things that pull us apart in marriage, right? There's the job. There's life responsibility. There's kids. There's pets. There's everything. Okay, 2 weeks ago, I was down in Florida teaching at Word of Life. institute down there for the college. And by Wednesday, all I wanted to do was what? Come home. And the airline did everything they could to keep me from getting home. They delayed me, so I missed my connecting flight. But I was going to get home, so my wife drove 2 hours to pick me up because she was going to get her husband home. See, this is what the song is saying. This is what the desire should be in the song. Now, I say the book is about sex, but really the book is not about sex per se. It's about becoming one. It's this idea of coming together. And this couple fights, not among themselves, but they fight to be together. Peace, shalom, wholeness is only found when this couple is together. Now we have to talk, what is this song not about? The song is not about God's love for Israel. Okay, that's what the Jews thought earlier on. There was an allegorical interpretation held by the Jews. And why? Well, it's because the language of the book. It talks about navels, bellies, breast, and the Jews didn't know what to do with it. So they said, because they come to chapter 2 and it says she has breast. And they said, what do we do with breast? So the Jews said, breast, two breasts, what do we do? Oh, one breast is Moses and one breast is Aaron, in which the Israelites are led. Okay, sounds good, because you don't have to deal with the language now. Just make it allegorical. The church fathers come along, and they're no more comfortable with breasts than the Jews were. And they're still stuck with two breasts. How do we handle two breasts? Oh, two. I know one breast is the New Testament, and one breast is the Old Testament, in which the church gets its nourishment from. And we go, oh, wow. And some of you are thinking, John, why did you bring McGinniss to our church? We're going to kick him out and kick you out at the same time. This book is important, and you notice when you opened it, it didn't have a PG-13 or an R rating before we read it. But the church didn't know what to do with it because of the subject matter. Because remember, the church fathers having a Platonic view, and I think John mentioned this the other day, that we don't know what to do with bodies. Are they good or are they bad? Well, they're good, and God says it is good. So it's not about God's love for the church or for the Jews. The song is not a narrative. This is not a story that traces the love between Solomon and a country lass called the Shulamite. Okay, it's not like courtship, marriage, and all the problems after marriage. It's not that. It is, and as it tells us from the very beginning, it is a song. If you notice, she says in chapter 1, verse 2, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. And as we see right away, I'm not letting my daughter date like this. She's not tasting wine, and she's not comparing it to his love. And none of us would allow our daughters or sons to date that way. So this starts in the middle of the relationship where they're already married. And that's somewhat of a common view that most scholars are moving away from today. Solomon wrote a song celebrating passion and desire between a man and a woman. What this does is it sets up a picture. Now, yesterday was beautiful in Connecticut, wasn't it? And most of us, you're just blessing God. I'm from Northeast Pennsylvania, and I'm saying this is wonderful to be in November to enjoy this, right? But in another month, what will it be like? It'll be brutal, and it'll last forever. At least what it seems like, right? You're going to see on the TV this ad, and they do focus it on the Northeast for us in the cold and dark, of the islands in the Caribbean. You'll see two chairs, an umbrella, and the chairs are empty. And as you watch the rain, the snow, and the cold, and the dark, what do you say? I wish I was there. And you turn to your spouse and say, is there any way we could get there? See, it makes you want something, right? That's what the song does. It makes you want something. It holds up the song and say, don't you want a relationship like this if you're married? Yes. And if you're looking at your marriage, you can evaluate and say, is our marriage like this? So it becomes both a picture and a mirror, something we want and something that helps us evaluate where we are. There are four main characters, or better, they're not even character, because all we know is their voices. They're the female lover. The female lover is the main voice in the song, and she speaks 65% of the time. Now, some of you are saying, yeah, I understand women speak way too much. That's not the point. Okay, this is interesting. In all ancient Near East love literature, whether it's Egyptian, Mesopotamian, the female is the main voice of the song. And some suggest because women tend to be more in tune with their emotions than guys are. Not that guys are cavemen, but there has been some accusations about us, our emotional intelligence, guys. Okay, so you have the female voice. Then you have the male voice, the male lover. Then you have the chorus of women known as the Daughters of Jerusalem. And the Daughters of Jerusalem act as this chorus, so when the guy's not there on the mental stage of the reader, she talks to this chorus of daughters, her friends who are unmarried, so she can share her thoughts when we're not overhearing the dialogue between the two lovers. And then there's a fourth voice that we're going to save, because that fourth voice is going to help us answer the questions that we posed at the beginning of our time. So let's look at, we're going to survey one movement, and I picked chapter 2, verse 8 for us to start with. There's a ton of stuff. Pastor John will help you walk through it. But I want you to look at chapter 2, verse 8. This is the beginning of the second movement. And she says, listen, my beloved, the male, behold, he is coming, climbing on the mountains, leaping on the hills. And what's he like? My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold, he's standing behind our wall. He is looking through the lattice. He is peering through the lattice. He's looking through the window. He's peering through the lattice. Notice he's far away. And it's almost like she looks at him, she says, oh, look it. He's bounding. And notice, if you're a certain age, listen, my beloved, he's coming, climbing on the mountains, leaping on the hills, faster than a speeding bullet. Who does it sound like? Superman. This is the first superhero in the Bible. And what is it saying? He's climbing on the mountains, leaping on the hills. Well, this has to be figurative, or this man is in great shape. But what's he saying, or what's she seeing? Nothing will keep him away from me. They're separated, but you're starting to see the desire. When I was in college, Joy was coming home for the holidays. She went to school in Missouri. I went to school in New Jersey. And I came home, I think, Thanksgiving or Christmas break or something like that. And my truck broke down. The transmission blew up on the way, but I had a friend I knew was going to happen. And my friend happened to follow me. We left my truck in a doctor's office an hour away. I took my laundry out, took my books out, got in his car, drove. We hit a blizzard. By the time I get home, it's 18 inches. And this is New Jersey, which is somewhat unusual. And I come in, my mom said, I'm so glad you're home. And he couldn't get to my neighborhood, so I had to walk a quarter mile to my house. So I come in, I drop my laundry down, I drop my books down, and I turn around. And my mom said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to walk over to Joy's house. She said, it's 3 miles away. It's a blizzard. I said, yeah? What's the question? I'm just going to walk down by the bay. I'll cut off a mile. It'll be 2 miles. She said, you're not staying home? All right, Mom, let me tell you the facts of life. I can visit you, or I can visit my girlfriend. My choice is, but please do my laundry. I walk 2 miles through snow, and I'm up to my chest. I get to Joy's house. I knock on the door. Her mom answers the door. Her first words, what are you doing here? And my thought was, why are people so stupid? Why are they asking me dumb questions? She said, it's a blizzard out. Yes, thank you. I want to see my girlfriend. And looked at me like, that's a dumb reason. See, this is what God is saying. This is what desire looks like. She sees him. And then notice, my beloved responded and said to me. So he finally gets there and says, arise, my darling, my beautiful one, and come along. And notice what he calls her. My darling, my beautiful one. They like each other. Notice he doesn't call her my old nag. My old horse. Well, he does call her a horse, but not the same way in chapter 1. And look what he says. For behold, the winter is past. He must have lived in Connecticut. He's looking forward to spring. The rain is over. The flowers have already appeared in the land. The time has arrived for pruning the vines. The voice of the turtle dove has been heard in our land. The fig tree has ripened its figs. The vines are in blossom, have given forth their fragrance. Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, and come along. Hey, spring is here. Let's get away. And remember, they're married. This is not courtship. So notice the desire, I want to be with you. But notice what he says. Oh, my dove. And this is a term of endearment. I don't know how many of us, help me, any terms of endearment, modern terms of endearment, that's an animal now these days that we use? We use hun, sweet. Any animals? What's that? Fox, yes, thank you. Come along, my fox. Now, why are you laughing? Well, it's been a long time since my wife was the size of a fox, you might be thinking. Have you looked in the mirror too, guys, in Ohio? But you're right, my fox. So dove is a term of endearment. But what does he want? In the cleft of the rock, in the secret place of the steep pathway, let me see your form, let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your form is lovely. In the cleft of the rock, in the secret places. Why does he want secret places? And everybody's looking at me like, don't say it out loud. But we all know why, right? They want to be alone. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Let me hear your voice, that means you're with me, and let me see your form. And why? Your voice is sweet, and your form is lovely. In spring, a young man's fancy turns to what? 2 things. Baseball and romance. I work on a university campus. In the fall, you'll see a bunch of singles walking around. When you get to spring, what do you see? Couples. Ring before spring. Ring in spring. You know, what they're looking for. Well, this is what they're looking for. Then notice, she says, yeah, let's get away. Oh, but she says here, catch the foxes for us. the little foxes that are ruining the vineyard while our vineyards are in blossom. What she's talking about, she's using this idea of foxes. These small foxes are obstacles in their marriage. There are these relationship issues. It could be money, it could be health, it could be job, it could be kids. It's not that they're bad, but they're ruining or they're threatening the vineyard. And the vineyard sometimes could be her body, sometimes it could be their relationship. And here it's their relationship and says, hey, catch these foxes. And we've all had foxes in a relationship. I think every couple should have in their house a trophy room of foxes that they've nailed. They set traps for. Because if you come to my house, John's been there, we have a trophy room. We have the money fox that we nailed to the wall. Yeah, money was a problem at one point, nail it. Then you have sin issue. Oh, we nail that to it. Catch the foxes, because the foxes which will ruin the relationship between two people. All of us should have this trophy room where we catch these foxes. Then what happens after we catch the foxes? Notice what she says. My beloved is mine, and I am his. He pastures among the lilies. Now, I took out the flock there because in the Hebrew it's not there, so he pastures among the lilies. And it gives the idea that he's a shepherd and he's bringing his sheep along. That's not the image that the author wants you to see. He uses the word pasture, but a better word would be he feeds. Well, what is he doing feeding among the lilies? What is this guy, vegetarian? No. We've seen in other parts of the book that lilies are her lips. What? He's feeding on her lips? Ugh. When Joe and I used to kiss, our kids would look at it and say, kissy face, and they go, yuck, and they'd run away. Well, this is what he's doing. He's feeding on her lips, and I'll let you fill in that metaphor anyway. But notice what she says, my beloved is mine, I am his. Notice this possession that goes both ways. He pastures among the lilies. How long? Until the cool of the day when the shadows flee away. Turn, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountain of Bether. And if you look, some of you might have a side margin there. It would be called a clift or a cleavage of some kind of spice. Now, I don't know why people don't like Bible study. Because guys, and anybody who's married here, I want you to go home and I want you to study this verse together and say, what is this mountains of Bether if it's cleavage? What is she saying? Well, she's putting herself as geography for him. Hey, I want us to enjoy each other, enjoy me, and this becomes geography. But notice we've gone from separation and we've gone to union. And what the song picks up is, don't you want a relationship like this? Yeah, this is what I want a relationship to look like. And this is what God is asking us to have. Do you want a relationship like this? But sometimes what I find is that marriages get stale over time and they don't want each other as much as they used to. A recent story of a cruise ship. A married couple went on a cruise. They were married quite a few years, and the wife went missing. She was reported missing 24 hours after she had gone off the ship, fallen off the ship, pushed off the ship. And I asked my dad and my mom were on a number of cruises, and before they passed away, I said, Dad, how long would you miss Mom on a cruise? He thought about it, said maybe 2 hours. Okay. Not 24? No. See, if you went on a cruise with your significant other and they weren't there for 24 hours, what would you do? Some of you might go to casino. I'm free, I could do anything I want. Maybe some of you would throw a party. Some of you wouldn't miss your significant other until you were getting off the ship and you needed somebody to help carry the luggage. And you look around and say, where is he? Well, no wonder that vacation was so good. He wasn't around. See, but for the song, it's only together. It's only this union that brings them together. So let's flip over. Now it's going to move to separation, but I want to move, just because of time, to chapter 4. We're going to jump back in. We've gone through another separation. We're going to come to now desire. And notice what he says about her. How beautiful you are, my darling, how beautiful. Your eyes are like doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats that have descended from Mount Gilead. Now, how many of you guys, when you saw your wife get ready this morning, said, dear, your hair is like a flock of goats? You're saying, that's stupid, McGinniss. Why would I ever say that to my wife? Well, a flock of goats is probably seeing the goats come down from Gilead, and the sun is probably shining, and the goats here would be probably dark, very black, and it would shine. And it could be the flow of her hair that he's looking at. So it is, even if we can't understand it or appreciate the metaphor, it is a compliment. And it says, you have hair like a flock of goats that have descended from Mount Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of newly shorn ewes, which have come up from their washing, all which bear twins, and not one of them has lost her young. What does that mean? Go ahead, tell me. She has what? She has all of her teeth. Yes. I mean, remember, what don't they have in ancient Israel? Dentist. All right, so guys, think about this. You see this beautiful girl, and you say, man, I want to meet her. So you have your dad and mom arrange the meeting. You go over to the house, and she's looking at you, not opening her mouth. And then she opens her mouth, and she has 2 teeth. She got in front of the camel at the wrong time, just popped them out. And what would you do? Thank you for the honesty. I'm out of here, Mom and Dad. Let's go. And not quick enough. All right? Your lips are like a scarlet thread, and your mouth is lovely. Interesting, back in, they did use cosmetics. During Solomon's time, cosmetics came from Egypt, and instead of full lips, it seems like this time of the culture, they liked very thin lips, but they did use lipstick and other cosmetics. Your mouth is lovely. Your temple's like a slice of pomegranate behind your veil. This is what we quite don't understand. Go to the store, get a piece of pomegranate, slice it, and put it up to your wife's cheek and say, what is this like? Not quite sure, but it's a positive. Notice it's behind your veil, and this is going to become important. So she has a veil on, but he can see enough, so it's a translucent veil. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with rows of stone, on which hung 1,000 shields, all the round shields of the mighty men. Here it's probably talking about her neck being stately, and she has a row of jewelry that's probably round like quarters that are knitted together and overlap. So it gives this idea of shields from her neck down. So not only is she beautiful, she's stately. She carries herself well. And notice he's moving from the top of her head to the bottom. Now, we won't have time, and I'll leave this for Pastor John. He can do chapter 7, and that should be only married couples, by the way, John, when you get there. He works up from her feet up. This is called the wasef. This is an Arabic word for a physical description. And he's describing her from top down. In chapter 7, he'll go from bottom up. And then he says, your 2 breasts are like 2 fawns, twins of gazelles, which feed among the lilies. Now, if you want to be spiritual, let's not say have fun. If you want to be spiritual, go home and figure out this metaphor. Because scholars haven't figured it out exactly yet, what the metaphor, but it is a positive one. And then he says, until the cool of the day when the shadows flee away, I will go my hill, mountain of myrrh, and my hill of frankincense. And if you're initiated in love, you know exactly what he's talking about. Then he says, look what he says, you are altogether beautiful, my darling, and there's no blemish in you. So notice he starts this wasef with how beautiful, then he moves with, you are altogether beautiful. Verses 8, come with me from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Journey down from the summit of Ammon, from the summit of Sinar and Hermon, from the dens of lions and the mountains of leopards. And say, oh my, lions, tigers, and bears. It seems here that somehow she's inaccessible to him, and we're not told why. It's just that he has to invite her to come from these dangerous places, and he can't go get her. But it's figurative. She's not literally there, but he has to invite her to come so that they can be together. And why? Well, verse 9 says, you have made my heart beat faster, my sister bride. Now that's just weird for us. My sister? Ugh. Well, sister bride is a term of endearment. So think about it, my sister bride. They use familial terms for wives, and it sounds strange to our ears, but that's the way they did it back then. You have made my heart beat faster with a single glance of your eye, with a single strand of your necklace. He's looking at her and says, my heart goes, twitter patter, twitter patter. It beats. And you say, man, the last time I looked at my wife, my heart didn't do that. Well, what's the problem? Well, there's a fox problem. We haven't caught that fox that's doing that. How much better is your love, my bride? How much better your love than wine, the fragrance of your oil, than all kinds of spices? He likes the way she smells. Your lips, my bride, drip honey. Honey and milk are under her tongue. Now, here's the question for you. How does he know what's under her tongue? Joe, I'm going to use you an example. Okay? So what does he go? Grab her by the mouth and tongue her like a bass and say, dear, open up your mouth. What's under your tongue? He knows what's under her tongue because what? He's tasted it. And you said, wait a minute. I thought the French invented that kind of kissing. How does he know milk and honey are under her tongue? Because he's tasted it. French kissing in the Bible. Well, it's actually Israelite kissing, but that doesn't have the same penchant as French kissing, I guess, right? But that's what he's talking about, and this is what he wants. Now, some of you are saying, McGinniss, what are you doing to us? Notice a locked garden, my sister, my bride, a rock garden. Your shoots are an orchard of pomegranates, your choice fruits, henna with nard plants, nard, saffron, calamus, cinnamon, with all types of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, along with the finest spices. You are a garden spring, a well of fresh water, a stream flowing from Lebanon. What he says is, you are beautiful. You're wonderful. You are like a garden. And remember, in that geography, everything's wasteland. It's desert. To be in this paradise place was a place of refreshment. And he's saying, that's what you are to me. Then goes on, and she says here, awake, O north wind, come, wind of the south, make my garden, that's what he just described her as, breathe out fragrance, let its spices be wafted abroad. May my beloved come into his garden and eat its choice fruits. She's offering him, and she's asking the wind to blow across her to have her aroma go to her beloved, that it might drag him by invitation back to her. And don't we do the same thing today? We say, no, we don't. Now, don't raise your hands, ladies, but how many ladies wear perfume? And why do you wear perfume? I just want to smell nice. At one point, you put perfume on to attract the guy you were interested in. Because guys are clueless. Guys are walking around and you're trying to get him to notice you, and he doesn't notice you because we're clueless. Then all of a sudden he smells something, he goes, what's that? And all of a sudden we notice the girl. Oh, look at that, you're a girl. You smell nice. Well, that's what he's talking about. And that's what she's talking about, but in a much more intimate way. May my beloved come into his garden. Now, she's just described her body as this garden. So you see the euphemism here of this coming into the garden. And my beloved eat his choice fruits. And notice this idea of garden, because it's going to become important in the next verse. This chapter 5 is a bad chapter division. Chapter 5 should be at the end of verse 1 of chapter 5, because this really concludes it. Now the male lover says, I've come into my garden, my sister bride. I've gathered my myrrh along with my balsam. I've eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I've drunk my wine and my milk. So what he's saying is, I've come into my garden. And notice there's this morphing of her garden becomes his garden. And this is really, really neat just to see this morphing of gardens together. And what he's saying is, hey, I'm enjoying you completely. So they're in the midst of this joy of this couplehood. And then notice these last two lines of this verse 1. Eat, friends, drink, imbibe deeply, O lovers. Say, what? Who in the world is speaking here? It can't be the lovers, because this voice is talking to them. It can't be the daughters of Jerusalem, because that would be untoward because of the intimacy we're overseeing. What I would suggest here is this is the voice of God. This is the voice of the narrator speaking for God. And you say, why doesn't it say Yahweh says? Well, remember, in that day, in Solomon's day, sex and spirituality were linked together in Baal worship. The pagans couldn't separate the two. They wouldn't separate the two. Sex was, between the gods, Baal and the Ashereth, was the way that the earth was fertile in the spring. And God told his people to stay away from Baal worship and Ashereth worship. So what I would suggest is God's name's not used, because in this area where we're talking about physical intimacy and sex, God doesn't want his name associated with it, so it can't be confused. So the narrator plays the voice of God and says, eat, friends, drink, and imbibe deeply, O lovers. This is the narrator's voice speaking for the voice of God. In the midst of this intimacy, in this midst of enjoying one another as men and women, God's voice comes in and speaks. And notice what he doesn't say. Stop doing that, you're having too much fun. He doesn't throw lightning bolts down. Matter of fact, he looks at the couple enjoying themselves, and what does he say? Get drunk with it. Drink it completely. Enjoy it fully. See, this comes and answers the question, this is what happens when you don't get caught up in the book and you forget to go through your PowerPoints. One answer to this question is sex is to be enjoyed. Why? Because God says so. There is no stronger verse in the entire Bible that gives God's view of sex. And this is one area that the church has not really come to grips with. We may say sex is right, but we really can't give a theological reason for it. We can give theological reasons for other things that we do in lives, but when it comes to physical intimacy, we can't. And here, this is the greatest. If you go to the New Testament, you'll have some verses on physical intimacy, but you won't have something like this that says, hey, enjoy it. And I created it to be enjoyed. You know, sex is not dirty, gross, something to be endured, boring, required, dreaded, legal prostitution, to be fearful, sinful, displeases God. No, God says it is a good thing and it's to be enjoyed fully. So we have to go back to and answer what you put down and say, is your answer congruent with what God says? Because as believers, we want to walk with God. And this should be in every area of life. So as a portrait, this song paints the masterpiece of what desire should look like between a married couple in marriage. Now, one we stepped over, and we can go back to chapter 2, a word to singles. In chapter 2, it says, I am the rose of Sharon, the lily of valleys. This is not Jesus. Okay, I know we've heard this 100 times. You know, he's the lily of the valley. Sorry, that's allegorical interpretation. What he's talking about there, she's saying, I am the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valley. What she's saying here is, I'm just one flower. What's a common flower in Connecticut? What's the most common flower? What's that? A dandelion? Hey, dandelion will work, yes. What she is saying is, I am just one dandelion. Now, notice what he says. Like a dandelion among the thorns, so is my darling among the maidens. What he's saying is, no, you might be one, you might be a dandelion, but all the other women, they're all thorns. And every woman said, oh, I wish my husband talked to me like that. Normally he tells me I'm the thorn in his side. But I said, now you're, all those other maidens, yeah, they're the thorns. And what does she say? Like an apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the young men. She takes the same agricultural metaphor, and I know you have a lot of evergreens trees up here. She says, my lover, my beloved? No, he's not an evergreen. He's an apple tree. Strong, vibrant, bearing fruit. And then she says, in his shade I took great delight, sat down, his fruit was sweet to my taste. For he has brought me into his banquet hall, his banner over me is love. I don't know what you're going to sing in Sunday school class. This is not the song you want to sing. His banner over me is love. The idea here is that she surrendered and his flag is over her, or it's an idea of conquest. So once I went through the song and I realized this, I had my kids stop singing this in Sunday school. Okay? His banner over me is love. It's not Jesus loving me. It's the love between this married couple. Now notice what she says. He brought me into his banquet hall, and actually banquet hall. His banner over me is love. Sustain me with raisin cakes. Refresh me with apples because I'm lovesick. What she's saying here is that I'm just overcome with love. And I need energy to keep loving him. So give me raisin cakes. Raisin cakes? That's the best you can do? What's our language of love? What's our food of love today? Come on, somebody said it. Chocolate. And what else? What's that? Flowers, yes. Another food. Thank you. And chocolate-covered strawberries. She's saying, give me the food of love that I have the energy to go on. And then she says in verse 6, let his left hand be under my head and his right hand embrace me. Now, I won't embarrass my wife by asking her to come up and we're going to act this posture out. But notice, this can't be a hug because his left hand is what? Under her head. That means what position are they in? They're lying down. Shh, don't say it out loud. And all of a sudden people are saying, wow, it's hot in here, isn't it? Whew. Now notice, in the midst of this heightening passion, what does the woman say? I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, I want you to promise by the gazelles or the hinds of the field that you will not arouse or awaken love until a proper time. See, it's okay to want this type of relationship if you're single, but she's talking to the daughters of Jerusalem, and by extension, she's talking to all the unmarried males and females and saying, hey, it's okay to want this type of relationship. Matter of fact, you should want this type of relationship. But don't do anything to arouse this feeling that can't be satisfied within marriage. And he says, by the gazelles and hinds of the field. Why? Well, I would suggest the one reason is because animals know the proper time to mate. They don't mate outside that proper time. So God says, hey, just see the animals, they know the proper time, so you wait until the proper time. But what I want you to see, if you're single here today, it's okay to have sexual feelings. Just don't do anything to arouse them before the proper time, and that's within marriage. So this book has a message to both singles and married. Sex is to be enjoyed because God says so, but only within the proper time. Now, I am a professor. The one thing I always do is ask questions and give time for questions. Now, some of you say, you're a stupid professor. Because who's going to ask questions now? What you can do is you can text Pastor John your questions now. So it sounds like he'll ask the question for you. And he won't tell me who you are, and he won't say your name out loud. So if you have a question, what time we finish, John? Now, okay. So we'll save those questions for tonight if you would like. All right? Thanks so very much.